You're going to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 7.
Why 1 to 7, Danny?
I'm so glad you asked, Russ.
Hi, I'm Russ.
And I'm Danny.
And this is the Memory Makers Podcast.
The show focused on helping you create amazing customer experiences and make more memories.
Memory Makers, Memory Makers, Memory Makers Podcast. There you go. Little sci-fi action happening your way for those of you who know where that comes from.
It's perfect. Well, today, Russ, we're going to just jump right into the topic. And
let's do it.
Today's topic is what we like to call the wheel of business. Now, we learned about an exercise called the wheel of life from a Tony Robbins event that we've been to, where you take different categories of your life and you analyze them to see how you would rank them on a score of low to high and different things, and learning how you can improve those scores over time in order to make your wheel more round. Well, what we did is we took that philosophy and we realized that can be very easily applied toward business. And so we've taken areas of your business, of your venue, whoever's listening or watching this, and divided it into 7 different sections. And we're going to go through and talk about what each of those sections are and a little bit of detail so you have some context. And then we're going to walk you through the steps of doing this exercise, how to rank yourself, and how to gain some leverage in order to make change.
And this is a really great exercise to do with your entire leadership team, each doing it individually and then kind of cross-comparing your notes and things, because this is ideally there to help you highlight areas that you have for improvement. But if you're nose blind to something because it's not in your day-to-day life and there's a different department that's overseeing it, like, do this as a collaborative, kind of individually, and then share with the group as you go through this exercise. And I've enjoyed this framework so much because it starts to give you more bite-sized areas that you can start tackling these big high-end problems, and that's what ultimately will get you traction as you move forward.
Well, let's jump right into it then.
Okay.
Section number 1 that I'm going to hit on is what we like to call vision and leadership. For those who watch or listen to this podcast a lot, this is going to be nothing new that we're talking about. This is a very common thread and a common theme to the things that we discuss. You know, as your business, do you have a sense of who you are? Do you have a sense of what you're about? Do you have that vision, that vivid vision, as Armando talked about in a previous episode, of where you want to take this business? And not only have you defined where you're taking it, have you communicated that clearly to your team? Do they have the buy-in from you? Do they have the trust of the leadership? There's so much about that vision and leadership portion and the way that that message gets communicated to the team. And this is all about that part of the equation of making sure that we know who we are, where we're going, what we stand for, and why, and that every person on our team also understands that same message.
Mm-hmm. And then next we look at employee engagement and trust. So again, another fan favorite, kind of topic of discussion on this podcast, but do our employees feel heard and seen? Are they comfortable asking questions and bringing up ideas to us? Is everybody just kind of trying to stick to their lane and not taking many chances? How do they, do they feel empowered to make autonomous decisions and experiment and try new things? This a level of, are we making ourselves available for the employees? Are we giving them opportunities to evaluate up the chain so that way they know and trust that everything that we're doing is setting egos aside and we want all of the ideas, not some of the ideas, so that way we can pick what's going to help move the needle the most for us and start putting that into action? And then are we following up on what we say we're going to do? Do we have that accountability? Do we have that track record of when we start down a path, do we see that through, or does it feel like it's lip service for 6 weeks and then are we moving right along?
The next section, brand equity. And a lot of people will hear this and they immediately think of marketing, and marketing is a certain portion of that, right? The message that you create about your business and what you put out into your community, what you put out into the world. But more importantly, the brand is what your marketplace says about you. And so it's not just what your website looks like and what your social media is. It is, what is the reputation among your customers, right? Do you go above and beyond to be able to deliver those experiences? What are the things that you do that are super unique that no one else in your market, none of your competitors can do. And when one of your customers or potential customer, someone who's maybe never been into your venue before, when they hear your name, what is it that they think of? What is it that they think about? Do they think that you are a great local business and they have really good feelings toward you? Is that something where they're really unsure? Is it something where they go, I don't even know what that is, right? All of that together makes up what we consider this portion of brand equity. It's what your community thinks and says about you, especially when you're not in the room, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And I think another important part of that section is how woven into the community fabric are you? Are you actively engaged? Are you helping local schools with fundraisers? Are you doing philanthropic and charitable work? Because those are the bigger pieces that your marketplace is going to identify your business more as a human, right? With certain characteristics and traits, and have those good feelings or neutral feelings if you're not out and kind of meeting them where they are, as opposed to just trying to get them through your doors. So love that. The next section is our product and service offerings. So this is a lot more straightforward. This is, the actual main components of what we have under the hood, so to speak, of, what is the quality of the attractions that we have? Do we have a tried and true attraction, but it's 15 years old and needs a little bit of TLC? Have we been doing the same thing with our laser tag experience, and we're not, spicing it up with different game varieties, or, having our team members really be switched on with their briefing, or are we just kind of going through the motions with it? And that can be applied to anything. Do we have an arcade, but does it need to be refreshed? Is it have some of the newer games? Does it have a variety of different offerings depending on what your local mix is really gravitating towards? Do you need to add some nostalgia in there for pinball? What are some of the things that we are nose blind to as far as the cleanliness of the facility? Again, if we've been open for, 4 years, 5 years, what needs a little bit of TLC, some paint touch-ups, some cleanups, different things like that we get used to on the day-to-day, and how do we actually start to look back and see? And some of you may do this even via secret shoppers and things like that, of what are the things that we can identify that we, just pass on by every single day because we're used to seeing it? How are we capturing those pieces, and is that leading to the quality? The other side is, what is the consistency of our service or our upsell opportunities when folks are in our door? Do they know how to have more fun with the time that they're there, because our staff is engaging and consistently having a good time and playing with the guests, and making them feel special when it comes to that? And so, looking at what that actually is, not just, hey, we've got the latest and greatest, but, so that part may be strong, but are we lackluster when it comes to the actual support because we're only relying on the flashy bells and whistles or the novelty aspect that it's new?
When you were talking about the TLC of products and the different areas of your facility, I was just imagining somebody walking through their venue holding a Bluetooth speaker playing TLC music.
Yeah.
And having like Waterfall and No Scrubs on.
Yeah, I was going to say No Scrubs should be your anthem for what needs TLC. That should be I can't do a No Scrubs Memory Makers jingle, but
you're only allowed to do one jingle per episode, so I'm going to cut you off right there.
Dang, I forgot we put that in the contract. Yeah, so that is definitely an area, and it can be something where, hey, we're not going to pay for a secret shopper, but we're going to bring in my neighbor or my mother-in-law or whomever, somebody that's got a good eye for always finding those areas of opportunity, because they're going to see that stuff in a unique and first-time way, and it's going to stick out to them much, much more than it is to folks that are in and out of that facility every single day, because it's just filed into the white noise of, oh yeah, we got to do that at some point.
Now everybody's favorite topic, cash flow and finances.
Woohoo!
Said with some sarcasm. Some people love it, some people really don't.
It just depends on how tight you're running the ship, and are you making good decisions, and is your market responding to what you're putting out there? So
yeah, when you open your spreadsheets, does it fill you with joy or dread based upon the numbers you're seeing? Which kind of goes into this, right? And for us, cash flow and finances it's the day-to-day cash flow of right now, but it's also the long-term finances of the business in general. Are you trending water? Are you up or down over previous months, over previous years? What does that look like? And as you are looking across the board, and let's say you've got plans for the future of wanting to be able to add new attractions, or maybe you want to expand your facility, or maybe you want to open another location. Well, in order for that to realistically happen, the cash flow and finances need to be in the right place. Now, we're not going to assign any actual dollar amount numbers to what this should look like, because it's going to be different for every single business and every single market. That's not really the point of this, but as the business owner, you get the sense of where you are financially and how healthy things are, what your profitability looks like. Are you able to save for future investments and be able to have the capital expenditures that you want to have to renovate the kitchen, or put in the new attraction, or do some of the bigger TLC items that Russ was talking about earlier? Or are you in a position where cash flow sucks and you're a little bit over leveraged, right? It's about understanding where that is as far as your books go, and how that will impact you now and into the future.
Well, and looking at that area too, you can even start to go a little bit more granular and look at, okay, most things look great, but man, we really tend to have this pendulum swing with our labor, right? And so are you paying too much in overtime? Do you need to pull the Andretti's magic solution out of your hat where you start your fiscal week on a Thursday, right? So that way that's the first couple of days going in through your most consistent and busiest time. So that way, as you get to the end of your fiscal week and you've seen that you've used up all that labor, like, hey, we can slim this back, and it's during a slow time. And a group like them, they haven't paid overtime in however many years. It's been 5 or 6 years that they've kept things in check because of just shifting when your fiscal week is actually starting. It's something as simple as that. So there are some really great ways that you can tackle these things and start to see some immediate traction to those points if it's something that needs attention. So next, we want to take a look at operational systems, right? What software do we have driving? Do we have 14 different software platforms, and do 3 of those maybe talk to each other part of the time? What's the overall synergy of that stuff looking like? Are there new things that are out there? I know that this is something that even on the creative work side, we're constantly looking at, hey, is this platform still the right platform based on where we are now versus when we bought it? And is it going to have, capacity for us moving forward based on where we want to go? Where are those friction points? What kind of redundant work is needed to be in place? And I know that it can almost be a cliche at times that, you've got one for your point of sale, you've got one for your food and beverage management, you've got one for your like the fact that there are so many stacks of software that can be out there. But then looking and working with your providers of, hey, I really need to see some more open integration with this type of a platform or this type of a thing. And sometimes that's going to be easier depending on how many other customers that they have that are also in that same situation. But there are also times where that's going to be a worthwhile investment for you to pay to have some custom API, work done if you can track what the labor and time savings are for that. So there may be some systems, we look at our CRM and we realize that we're paying more than what we probably should, but it's because that system has some really critical factors that we think are really unique and special to letting us do things that others can't, and in a way that they can't. And so as you go through your different software and things, like, it's okay at times to overspend on that if you're getting an actual quantifiable return based on where it's going to let you do other things. There may be some other pieces that it's like, hey, a good old-fashioned spreadsheet's still going to be the way to go. We don't necessarily need to be paying a monthly, fee for this or licenses and things like that, because we just need to be able to capture data and put it into something and have somebody get heads down on some just straight up spreadsheets to fix that. So, how fluid are those different things? How complex are they? Where do the friction points actually take place between those? So that way, if you do get to a point that you want to be evaluating some new software systems, you have a better set of questions to go through that vetting process with them. And so that way you're not just seeing all of the cool features that provider wants to highlight for you, but you have much more specific questions that then they can either have a yes or a no, or I need to get back to you on. So that way you're not just kind of rinsing and repeating the same frustration cycles. You may find that you're asking for a unicorn that doesn't exist. And if you go through that enough times, then you may have to figure out a way to kind of circumnavigate that. But looking at those and having more intentional questions is so important when it comes to these operational systems and your software platforms, because otherwise, that's going to be a friction point every single time that someone has to touch it. And that ultimately creates, less enthusiasm for the people that are having to do that work, more time that's just wasted with redundancies, all of that good stuff. So this is a huge area that by really evaluating what could make this better for me and how do I start to look for new options for it, that can really open up some doors to get more traction to the rear wheels.
And the final category that we'll hit on is real estate. And this is relevant regardless of whether you are leasing your space or you own the land and the property. Both are relevant because it's, well, what does our neighborhood look like? How much traffic are we getting to this area? What are our signage opportunities based upon the local zoning ordinances? I know when you and I worked at that laser tag facility on the north side of Indianapolis, the location itself was really close to downtown Carmel, and that was really great. But the city limited drastically what you could do with signage to point people in the right direction, which was a friction point at times. You look at your overall footprint. Are we outgrowing the space? And the answer is almost always yes, right? Every FEC operator I've ever talked to has said, "Oh, if I only just had a little bit more space," right? Yeah. But it's not just are we outgrowing it, but do we have the ability to add more? If you're leasing your space and you're next to a couple other tenants, well, are you going to have the opportunity to take over the next spot over to expand when that tenant moves out? What does that look like? Or are you landlocked and you're stuck no matter what? That's going to be your footprint, right? Understanding how all of these pieces play together will help you analyze, which we're going to get into very briefly, of how to score yourself, how to analyze this part of the pie, so to speak, this part of the wheel. So if I go through real quick and just recap all 7 of these categories, and then we're going to get into some of the next sections here on how to go through this process. So first is the vision and leadership. Then you have the employee engagement and trust. Then you've got brand equity. Then the product and service offerings, cash flow and finances, operational systems, and finally real estate. So those are the 7 areas and the 7 categories. Russ, I believe you also have a bonus item to cover.
I do. So as we go through this, it's always easy to start with kind of the gut feeling and the anecdotal aspect of this. But as much as you can, when you really start to take this after this initial exercise and you go through this, one thing that I will always encourage folks to do is, have we actually verified that what our feeling is the case, right? Do we have actual data to back up some of these things? It's much easier from that aspect when you look at things like your cash flow and finances, or even potentially your real estate. Like, some of it is inherently going to be a bit subjective, but wherever you can, looking at where can we use data, and if we can't have data to it, maybe there are some things that we need to be doing to start capturing and measuring that. So that way, as we do set what these new future goals are to improve them, we can have an actual baseline, and we're not just kind of going solely by feel. So that's always a good recommendation as you start down this path after you do this exercise of where can we get more hard data around it. And if we don't have that by the way that we're currently set up, what would be some equal opportunity offender baseline questions that we can start to ask, because it may not be perfect, but it at least gives you something to start with.
So let's get into the exercise itself. Now that we understand all of these 7 categories, what you're going to do is go through each of them one by one, and you're going to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 7.
Why 1 to 7, Danny?
I'm so glad you asked, Russ. Typically, people will say a scale of 1 to 10, one being absolutely terrible and 10 being perfect. But the problem is with 1 to 10, you can say 7 as your score is a very safe number of like, well, I know it's not really good, but 7's not also really bad, right? So it's too easy of a safe number. So I like doing 1 to 7 because each increment from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and so on means more because you have a smaller scale that you're working with, and there are fewer safe numbers that you can just pop in there and feel okay about, not feel great, not feel terrible. But realistically, we want this to be honest, right? So go through and score yourself when you look at the leadership and vision. Are you a 1, which is terrible? It could not be any worse. Or are you a 7, which means it's perfect and could not be any better? There's a very good chance none of you will score a 1 or a 7 on any of these categories, if we're being quite honest, right? Because there's always some room for improvement. But what's great about this is, as you go through this exercise and you do it more and more often, is that your definition today of what a 7 is, 2 years from now, that definition is probably going to be different. So there's a built-in way to grow with your expectations in the future and continue improving your business. So that's what you want to do. Take each of these categories, all 7 of them, and score them from 1 to 7. This is a 2, this is a 3, this is a 2, this is a 6, whatever it is, and be fully honest with yourself.
What if I feel like it's like a 4.5?
Don't do that. If you're no half numbers, do whole numbers.
Round down.
If you're in between, definitely round down, because that's probably the more realistic number. And the point here is not to be dramatic about it, and not to kick yourself and I can't believe it's just let's approach reality on reality's terms, call a spade, so we know exactly what we're looking at. And then, Russ, you're going to take us through the next steps of this exercise.
Yeah, so once you have those ratings and you make those 7 kind of almost like a pie chart, right? You've got the slivers of your pie, each representing the 7 categories. So that way, and again, why it's called the wheel of business is as you look from vision and leadership, that may be at a 6 because you guys are really kicking butt and taking names, and employee engagement and trust is at a 5. Not a huge transition there. That's still keeping a relatively equal slope. But then we all of a sudden get to unique brand equity and we think that's a 3. Well, that's a big divot in that wheel. And so one of the things then that you want to take a look at is take your lowest 3 scores. So if you look at all 7 of those and you kind of fill in this little pie chart as you go through to rank these, and you see, okay, what are the 3 areas that we have the lowest scores with? Then we take a look at that and say, okay, why does it feel like it's that 2 or it's that 3 and not a 5, 6, or a 7, when it comes to that? And what's important here is to really drive in of what does this feel like to me as an owner? What does it feel like for our guests? What does it feel like for our staff? What are these pain points that are associated with this? So that way we can really identify, one, not only what the factors are that are contributing to that lower score, but 2, making sure that we're cognizant of what the real opportunity cost is by having it be this low. And so that way we can have a more visceral connection to why this needs to change or improve, because then as you set forth to address these issues, the rest of your team is also going to have more consistent buy-in, understanding, and empathy as to why this is something that's really significant. So start with those things. Talk, what is the experience like at a 2? What does it feel like? What are the reactions from you, your guests, your staff? And so that way, again, you really understand the friction that is there. So it's not easy to just play whack-a-mole with it as you move forward of like, oh yeah, we'll get to that at one point. Like, you need to feel this a little bit as to why that tension is there around this topic, because that's ultimately what's going to be the fuel for surpassing and growing what that capacity is for you. And Danny, you always have a great line that you talk about where change doesn't happen until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, right? Like what's known and what's familiar, all of that, like we've gotten a little bit desensitized to it. That's not as painful until we realize like this is costing us money. This is costing us guests not coming back as frequently or ever again. This is causing something for our churn rate, and we're not serving our employees, or we're not serving our community as high. Like we really need to connect with what that is, so that way we can realize and the team can realize this is something that is worth our time, effort, and energy to be better at.
And this should feel uncomfortable when you do this. If it doesn't feel uncomfortable at all, then you're probably not going deep enough on what the pain points really are. And to Russ's point, we want to be able to gain leverage over this so that it makes change more realistic to actually happen. Because if we don't confront and realize the true cost and pain in this moment and how that will compound in the future if nothing happens, then nothing's going to happen. And so that's the point of this part. Is it feels kind of strange. Like, I want to write down all the bad things about this. Yeah. Kind of. That's exactly what you want to do.
But necessary.
Exactly.
And so, after then you've identified what does it feel like for the 3 lowest scored pieces, then I want you to actually, put on your optimistic hat. So now we get to take off our, uncomfortable, portion of this exercise, and we get to dream, and we get to get a little bit excited and more hopeful of, hey, what if, if we're at a 3 on this, what does a 5 or a 6 or a 7 actually look like and feel like? And what is all of the positive association with that? Right? Like, are we seeing more revenue that comes from it? Are we having a greater impact within the community? Like, what are the tangible things that we would see come from improving these different areas? What problems does it fix that are a pain in the butt day to day, every single day? And how does that then alleviate the overall, kind of run and gun, stressful, fire putting out that we find ourselves in from time to time? Like, how does it feel from a personal part of like, gosh, when I get done at the end of the day, I don't feel grateful that I get to get out of there. Or when I'm driving into the facility, like I'm actually, excited and driven to get there, and jump right in. And I feel motivated because we're making progress. And what new things are possible to us before of, hey, does this put us in a point that over 5 years, we then have enough capital to put away to develop a second center? Does that further our vision and our creative need to be that force for good out there? So, when you go through this exercise, being very honest and candid of where those pie slivers all kind of rank out so you can see how lopsided or dingy the wheel is, identifying those low points, seeing what it looks like to get you up to those next levels. So that way, again, you have a more well-rounded wheel that will go smoother in your business. So that way it feels, like you can actually start attacking these issues that can seem very nebulous and high level and all of those things, or just one more thing on the list that needs done. This is a great way to start prioritizing and executing on the areas that are going to move the needle the most for you going forward.
Speaking of moving the needle, that's the final and most important part of this process, right? We recognized how we score ourselves in each category. We've recognized what those lowest scores feel like, the pain points associated with that for ourselves, our team, and our customers. We've recognized where if we increase that score from a 2 to a 4, 2 to a 5, whatever that is, what the positive benefits that will come from that. And that feels really good. But then nothing happens if nothing happens, right? It's for each of those categories, those lowest 3 categories that you defined, that you said, what does it feel like at a low score? Will it feel like at a high score? For each of them, what is something you can start doing today, right now, in this moment, to start you down the path and create the compound effect over days and weeks and months to get you to that 5 or that 6 or that higher score, or what you define right now as a 7? Because none of this will happen overnight. All of it will take time. But the most important thing is that it is small actions consistently done can produce extraordinary results. And that action has to start today, not when it's convenient later on, not when you might want to get to it. And that's why being really particular about what the pain point is gives you the motivation and the leverage to start tackling these issues now. And so that you've been able to take these problem areas, really define it from something nebulous to something very specific, the pain points, where you want to go, and then now you start having your action items to do in this moment to create that compound effect, to be able to produce a more well-rounded wheel. And next time that you do this exercise in 6 months or a year from now, you feel like you're in a much better place and you can continue tweaking, improving, and moving on from that point.
And by doing this, bringing your team together, having you each kind of do it individually and then sharing what everybody's unique perspectives are, it's also going to start to give you a much better roadmap of who should be doing what by when you're trying to tackle these things on. So you're inherently setting up better, smarter goals and things that are going to be more achievable, and having accountability that goes along with that. And that is, who on your team is either going to have the skill set or the aptitude or attitude to start mapping out these next steps. And so by having everybody looking at that together based on the individual, kind of perspectives that they have, you'll also have some things that rise to the top that make the most sense, that need the most immediate change and the most urgent timeframes and all of that stuff. But that way, again, this is not something that's being dictated from down on high, but you're soliciting the input from your team because they have those real world examples of what's working and what's not as you go through this.
And you may also find that there are some categories that you and the rest of your team score very differently. Because if you score employee engagement and trust as a 6 and your management team says it's more like a 3, there's obviously a mismatch in the way that different people are viewing it. And that's an opportunity for you and the leadership team, you and the managers, to get on the same page, to understand where that mismatch is. And I think some of that friction that comes out of it is super beneficial. Absolutely. Because it helps get everybody on the same page with what the reality is, instead of just what it is from your own individual perspective.
Big time.
And that, to me, I think, Russ, is a good place to wrap up the Wheel of Business.
I like it. We've got more awesome content coming your guys' way. Hopefully you've been enjoying the more guest interviews and things like that we've been bringing to you on the weekly episodes. So be sure to come back and get some more of those insights as we continue to add more content.
If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
I'll always appreciate those 5 stars. Please and thank you.
If you've got ideas for future episodes, whether that's topics or guests that you'd like to see, follow us on social media and send us a DM.
And big shout out as always to Mikey Mike on the 1s and 2s running the ultra web for us. And thank you for joining us. And we will catch you on the next one, troublemakers. Huzzah!
Did it. Can you pull the updated logo from Drive and resave it? It's going to bug the crap out of me now that I know it's there. Yeah, well, I didn't know
Again,
it. Now that I
nose
do.
blind, just like what we were talking about.
I randomly come across like older versions of it, and it just makes me go, Mike, we've come a long way.
All right.
Positive energy.
Positive energy. All right, let's do it to it.